Dorothy Must Die by Danielle Page, Chapter 1. I first discovered I was trash 3 days before my 9th birthday. 1 year after my father lost his job and moved to Secaucus to move with a woman named Crystal, and 4 years after my mother had the car accident, started taking pills, and began exclusively wearing bathroom slippers instead of normal shoes. I was informed of my trashiness on the playground by Madison Pendleton, a girl in a pink Target sweatsuit who thought she was all that because her house had 1.5 bathrooms. Salvation Army's trash, she told the other girls on the monkey bars, while I was dangling upside down by my knees and minding my own business, my pigtail scraping the sand. That means she doesn't have any money, and all her clothes are dirty. You shouldn't go to her birthday party, or you'll be dirty too. When my birthday party rolled around that weekend, it turned out everyone listened to Madison. My mom and I were sitting at the picnic table in the Dusty Acres Mobile Community Recreation Area, wearing our sad little party hats, our sheet cake gathering dust. It was just the two of us, same as always. After an hour of hoping someone would finally show up, Mom sighed, poured me another big cup of Sprite, and gave me a hug. She told me that, whatever anyone at school said a trailer was where I lived, not who I was. She told me that it was the best home in the world because I could go anywhere. Even as a little kid, I was smart enough to point out that our house was on blocks, not wheels. Its mobility was severely oversold. Mom didn't have much of a comeback for that. It took her until Christmas of that year when we were watching The Wizard of Oz on a big flat-screen television, the only physical thing that was a leftover from her old life with Dad, to come up with a better answer for me. "See," she said, pointing at the screen, "you don't need wheels on your house to get somewhere better. All you need is something to give you that extra push." I didn't think she believed it even then, but at least in those days she still cared enough to lie, and even though I never believed in a place like Oz, I did believe in her. That was a long time ago. A lot had changed since then. My mom was hardly the same person at all anymore. Then again, neither was I. I didn't bother trying to make Madison like me anymore, and I wasn't going to cry over cake. I wasn't going to cry, period. These days, my mom was too lost in her own little world to bother cheering me up. I was on my own, and crying wasn't worth the effort. Tears or no tears, though, Madison Pendleton still found ways of making my life miserable. The day of the tornado, although I didn't know the tornado was coming yet, she was slouching against her locker after fifth period, rubbing her enormous pregnant belly and whispering with her best friend, Amber Bordeaux. I'd figured out a long time ago that it was best to just ignore her when I could, but Madison was the type of person it was pretty impossible to ignore even under normal circumstances. Now that she was 8.5 months pregnant, it was really impossible. Today, Madison was wearing a tiny t-shirt that barely covered her midriff. It read, "Who's Your Mommy?" across her boobs in pink cursive glitter. I did my best not to stare as I slunk by her on my way to Spanish class, but somehow I felt my eyes gliding toward past her belly to her chest and then to her face. Sometimes you just can't help it. She was already staring at me. Our gazes met for a tiny instant. I froze. Madison glared. "What are you looking at, trailer trash?" "Oh, I'm sorry. Was I staring? I was just wondering if you were the teen mom I saw on the cover of Star this week." It wasn't like I tried to go after Madison, but sometimes my sarcasm took on a life of its own. The words just came out. Madison gave me a blank look. She snorted. "I didn't know you could afford a copy of Star." She turned to Amber Bordeaux and stopped rubbing her stomach just long enough to give it a tender pat. "Salvation Army's jealous. She had a crush on Dustin forever. She wishes this was her baby." I didn't have a crush on Dustin. I definitely didn't want a baby, and I absolutely did not want Dustin's baby. But that didn't stop my cheeks from going red. Amber popped her gum and smirked an evil smirk. "You know, I saw her talking to Dustin in 3rd period, she said. She was being all flirty." Amber puckered her lips and pushed her chest forward. "Oh, Dustin, I'll help you with your algebra." I knew I was blushing, but I wasn't sure if it was from embarrassment or anger. It was true I'd let Dustin copy my math homework earlier that day, but as cute as Dustin was, I wasn't stupid enough to think I'd ever have a shot with him. I was Salvation Army, the flat-chested trailer trash girl whose clothes were always a little too big and a lot too thrift store, who hadn't had a real friend since 3rd grade. I wasn't the type of girl Dustin would go for, with or without the existence of Madison Pendleton. He had been borrowing my algebra almost every day for the entire year, but Dustin would never look at me like that. Even at 40 pounds pregnant, Madison sparkled like the words on her oversized chest. There was glitter embedded in her eyeshadow, in her lip gloss, in her nail polish, hanging from her ears in shoulder-grazing hoops, dangling from her wrist in blingy bracelets. If the lights went out in the hallway, she would light it up like a human disco ball. Like human bling. Meanwhile, the only color I had to offer was in my hair, which I'd dyed pink just a few days ago. I was all sharp edges and angles, words that came out too fast and at the wrong times, and I slouched. If Dustin was into shiny things like Madison, he would never be interested in me. I didn't know if I was exactly interested in Dustin either, but we did have that one thing in common. We both wanted out of Flat Hill, Kansas. For a while, it had almost looked like Dustin was going to make it, too. All you need is just a little push sometimes. Sometimes it's a tornado. Sometimes it's kind of a right arm that gets you a football scholarship. He had been set to go, until 8.5 months ago, that is. I didn't know what was worse, to have your shot and screw it up, or to never have a shot in the first place. I wasn't, I protested. Before I could finish, Madison was all up in my face. Listen, dumb gum, she said. I felt a drop of her spit hit my cheek and resisted the urge to wipe it away. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction. Dustin's mine. We're getting married as soon as the baby comes, and I can fit into my Aunt Robin's wedding dress, so you better stay away from him. Not that he'd ever be interested in someone like you, anyway. By this point, everyone in the hallway had stopped looking into their lockers, and they were looking at us instead. Madison was used to eyes on her, but this was new to me. Listen, I mumbled back at her, wanting this to be over. It was just homework. I felt my temper rising. I'd just been trying to help him, not because I had a crush on him, but because he deserved a break. She thinks Dustin needs her help, Amber chimed in. Taffy told me he heard Amy offer to tutor him after school, just a little one-on-one academic counseling. She cackled loudly. She said tutor like I'd done a lap dance for Dustin in front of the whole fourth period. I hadn't offered anyway. He had asked. Not that it mattered. Madison was already steaming. Oh, she did she? Well, why didn't I give this bitch a little tutoring of my own? I turned to walk away, but Madison grabbed me by the wrist and jerked me back toward to face her. She was so close to me that her nose was almost touching mine. Her breath smelled like Sour Patch Kids and kiwi strawberry lip gloss. Who the hell do you think you are trying to steal my boyfriend, not to mention my baby's dad? He asked me, I said quietly, so that only Madison could hear. What? I knew I should shut up, but it wasn't fair. All I'd tried to do was something good. I didn't talk to him. He asked me for help, I said louder this time. And what could he find so interesting about you? She snapped back, as if Dustin and I belonged to entirely different species. It was a good question. That kind that gets you where it hurts. But an answer popped into my head right on time. Not 2 seconds after Madison wobbled away down the hall. I knew it was mean, but I flew it out of my mouth before I had the chance to even think about it. Maybe he just wanted to talk to someone his own size. Madison's mouth popped open and closed without saying anything coming out. I took a step back, ready to walk away with my tiny victory, and then she rolled into her heels, wound up, and before I could duck, punched me square in the jaw. I felt my head throbbing as I stumbled back and landed on my butt. It was my turn to be surprised, looking up at her dazed, fuzzy-headed confusion. What had just happened? Madison had always been a complete bitch, but aside from the occasional shoulder check in the girls' locker room, she wasn't usually the violent type. Until now. Maybe it was the pregnancy hormones. Take it back, she demanded, as I began to get to my feet. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Amber a second too late, always one to take a cue from her best friend. She yanked me by the hair and pushed me down towards the ground. The chant of, "Fight, fight, fight," boomed into my ears. I checked for blood, relieved to find my skull intact. Madison stepped forward and towered over me, ready for the next round. Behind her, I could see that a huge crowd had gathered around us. "Take it back. I'm not fat," Madison insisted, but her lip quivering a tiny bit at the N-word. "I may be pregnant, but I'm still a size 2. "Kick her," Amber hissed. I scooted away from her rhinestone-studded sandal and stood up, just as the assistant principal, Mr. Scranton, appeared, flanked by a pair of security guards. The crowd began to disperse, grumbling that the show was over. Madison quickly dropped her punching arm and went back to rubbing her belly and cooing. She scrunched her face up into a pained grimace, like she was fighting back tears. I rolled my eyes. I wondered if she would actually manage to produce tears. Mr. Scranton looked from me to Madison and back again through his wire rims. "Mr. Scranton," Madison said shakily, "she just came at me, at us." She patted her belly protectively, making it clear that she was speaking for two these days. He folded his arms across his chest and lowered his glare to where I still crouched. Madison had him at us. Really, Amy? Fighting with a pregnant girl? You've always had a hard time keeping your mouth shut when it's good for you, but this is low, even for you. "She threw the first punch," I yelled. It didn't matter. Mr. Scranton was already pulling me to my feet to haul me off to the principal's office. "I thought you could be a bigger person at a time like this. I guess I overestimated you, as usual." As I walked away, I looked over my shoulder. Madison lifted her hand from her belly and gave me a smug little wave, like she knew I wouldn't be coming back.